Rachel, please use the freight elevator when you leave. The smell of your sweat is making my guests hard to breathe. Take the cash and go. My sister Andrea said those exact words to me, while 20 of her law firm colleagues watched. Then she smiled, and deliberately tilted her glass, letting a splash of vintage red wine hit the white floor inches from my hand. I was on my knees in greasy coveralls, having just fixed her air conditioning for free. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I wiped up the wine, pocketed the crumpled bills she threw at me, and walked out the door. She thought she was just humiliating her blue-collar sister. She didn't know she had just started the 30-day countdown to her total destruction. Driving away from her building, I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the hum of the engine and thought about the math. That's what kept me sane for the last 7 years. Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't mock you in front of strangers. $34,000. That is the exact number flashing in my head. That is the price tag of my sister's career. Her luxury apartment. And that arrogance she wears like a designer coat. And I paid every single cent of it. You have to understand. I didn't start out as a CEO. I started out as the sister who promised our dying father she would take care of the family. 7 years ago, while Andrea was posting pictures of her law school acceptance letter, I was living in a retrofitted shipping container on a construction site because it was free. I can still taste the drywall dust in the back of my throat. I worked double shifts in hazardous industrial zones, crawling through ventilation shafts that hadn't been cleaned in decades, breathing in mold and fiberglass just to earn the hazard pay. I ate instant noodles for dinner 5 nights a week, not because I couldn't cook, but because I was too exhausted to stand up. Every month, like clockwork, I transferred the money. Not to her directly, but to the Anderson Family Advancement Trust. It sounds official, doesn't it? It was just a fancy name for my blood, sweat, and bank account. I paid her tuition. I paid for the bar exam prep course she swore she needed. I paid the rent on that high-rise apartment, where she just humiliated me. And what did I get in return? I got to watch her live the life I was buying for her through a screen. I remember one night specifically. It was 3 years ago. I was working a graveyard shift at a chemical plant, freezing cold, my hands covered in grease and minor burns. I took a break to check my phone, and there it was. A photo of Andrea at a 5-star resort in Bali. She was holding a coconut, looking tan and rested. The caption read, "Self-made rewards for a hard semester." Self-made. I stared at that caption until my vision blurred. I had transferred $2,000 into her account that morning for textbooks. Apparently, textbooks look a lot like tropical vacations. But I didn't say anything. I told myself she was young. I told myself she needed to fit in with her wealthy peers. I made excuses for her because that's what you do when you love someone more than you love yourself. But the silence from her end was deafening. In 7 years, Andrea never once asked me if I was tired. She never asked how I got the scars on my arms. She never asked if I had enough to eat. The only time my phone rang was when the transfer was late. "Rachel, the rent is due on the 1st, not the 2nd, she would say, her voice tight with annoyance, as if I were a tenant falling behind. Not the benefactor keeping her afloat. I became an invisible ATM. I was necessary. But I wasn't a person. I was just a function. And tonight, standing on that white tile floor, I finally realized that to her, I wasn't even a sister. I was just the help. And you don't invite the help to the table. You pay them, and you tell them to leave. Well, Andrea was about to learn a very hard lesson about economics. When the funding stops, the lifestyle ends. And I was about to close the bank permanently. But the money wasn't even the worst part. You can make more money. You can't buy back your dignity. The real turning point, the moment I stopped being her sister and started becoming her executioner, happened 3 months ago. I had just finished a 16-hour shift. I was exhausted, covered in grime, and I stopped by her apartment to drop off a rent check because she didn't trust the mail. She didn't invite me in. She met me in the hallway, holding a thick document in a blue folder. She didn't say hello. She just shoved the papers against my chest. "I need you to sign this," she said, checking her watch like my presence was costing her billable hours. I looked at the header. It was a non-disclosure agreement. A legal contract. I flipped through the pages, my tired brain trying to make sense of the legalese. It was a formal agreement, stating that I would never, under any circumstances, disclose a familial relationship with Andrea Anderson to any employee, partner, or client of her law firm. I looked up at her, blinking. "You want me to sign a contract saying I'm not your sister?" "It's just for protection, Rachel," she said, crossing her arms. "My firm is elite. We deal with Fortune 500 companies. Image is everything. Having a sister who crawls around in vents and fixes toilets, it confuses the brand. It lowers my stock. Just sign it. It protects both of us. Protects us." as if my existence was a liability she needed insurance against. In that moment, I could have screamed. I could have torn the paper up and thrown it in her face. I could have told her right then that the vent crawler she was so ashamed of was actually the owner of the company her firm just hired for a $6 million renovation. But I didn't. And here is where people get confused. They ask me, Rachel, why did you stay silent? Why did you sign it? They call it weakness. Psychologists might call it the invisible chains of the survivor, that conditioning that keeps you seeking approval from the person hurting you. But that wasn't it. Not for me. Not anymore. I signed it because I know how to hunt. You see, you don't fight a narcissist when they are hungry and climbing. They are too alert, too defensive. You wait. You feed them. You let them win the small battles. You let them believe they are gods. Untouchable and superior. You feed their ego until it gets so bloated and heavy that it blinds them to reality. I wasn't being weak. I was fattening the pig for the slaughter. I knew that if I fought her then, she would be on guard. But if I signed that paper, if I let her erase me, she would feel safe. She would think I was broken, and a narcissist who feels safe is a narcissist who makes mistakes. She would get sloppy. She would get arrogant. And she would walk right into the trap I was already building in my head. So I took her pen. I signed my name on the line that legally disowned me. I handed it back to her and watched her smile, that smug, satisfied smile. She thought she had just secured her future. She had no idea she had just signed her own death warrant. Thanks, Rachel, she said, turning back to her door. You're a good sister. In your own way. You're welcome, I said. And I walked away into the night, feeling lighter than I had in years. Because I wasn't carrying the burden of saving her anymore. I was just waiting for the right moment to let her fall. And I knew exactly how to make it happen. I didn't need to use force. I just needed to use her own greed against her. The opportunity arrived exactly 1 week later. And just like I predicted, it was born out of Andrea's desperation. I was visiting our mother for Sunday dinner. Andrea stormed in an hour late, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her designer blazer was wrinkled, and her eyes were wild. She threw her bag on the couch and immediately started pacing, venting to Mom about her boss, James. He gave me 24 hours, she snapped, ignoring me completely. He wants a 20% cost reduction on the new tower project. Or he's pulling me off the lead council track. 20%? It's impossible. The engineering bids are already rock bottom. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my tea, watching her spiral. This was it. The moment of weakness. I need a miracle, she muttered, grabbing a glass of wine. I need something the other bidders missed. I stood up. I'm going to the bathroom, I said quietly. I left my laptop open on the kitchen counter. This wasn't carelessness. It was precision. I had spent the previous night crafting the perfect bait. On the screen, glowing bright in the dim kitchen light, was an unsent email draft. The recipient line was addressed to Vertex Solutions, James's biggest competitor in the commercial real estate market. The subject line read, the energy breakthrough James's team missed. And attached to that email was a single PDF file named Confidential Project Alpha PDF. I walked into the hallway, counted to 10, and then moved out of sight, leaning against the wall where I could see her reflection in the hallway mirror. It took Andrea less than 30 seconds. As soon as the bathroom door clicked shut, she was hovering over my computer. I saw her eyes scan the screen. I saw the realization hit her, the greedy, desperate spark of someone who thinks they just found a winning lottery ticket on the sidewalk. She looked around to check if Mom was watching. Mom was busy at the stove. Andrea pulled a flash drive from her purse. She always carried one for work, and jammed it into my USB port. Her fingers flew across the trackpad. Drag. Drop. Copy. She yanked the drive out, shoved it into her pocket, and stepped away from the computer just as I flushed the toilet to signal my return. When I walked back into the kitchen, she was scrolling through her phone, feigning disinterest. But her breathing was shallow. She thought she had just stolen a multi-million-dollar idea from her blue-collar sister to save her own skin. She thought she was a genius. She had no idea she had just downloaded a digital bomb. That file wasn't a breakthrough. It was a carefully constructed trap. I had drafted a proposal that looked flawless on the surface. Professional schematics, impressive jargon, aggressive cost-cutting estimates. But buried deep on page 14, in the technical voltage load calculations, was a fatal error. An error that only a seasoned engineer would spot. An error that, if implemented, would cause the building's main breakers to overheat and fail within 48 hours of operation. I didn't say a word. I packed up my laptop, finished my tea, and left. But I wasn't done. The technical trap was set. But I needed to secure the financial ruin, too. The next morning, I walked into the office of my attorney, Mr. Henderson. I placed a stack of documents on his desk. Is it time? He asked. It's time, I said. Execute the clawback provision. You see, the money I had been sending Andrea for 7 years, that $34,000 for her tuition and lifestyle, wasn't a gift. I'm not that naive. Every time I sent a check, I included a digital DocuSign cover sheet labeled Educational Support Grant. Andrea, in her arrogance and laziness, never read the fine print. She just clicked accept to get the money deposited. The fine print was specific. It stated that the funds were a conditional grant contingent on the recipient maintaining professional integrity and good standing in their field. It included a clawback clause. If the recipient was terminated for cause, fraud, or professional misconduct, the grant retroactively converted into a high-interest demand loan, payable in full within 72 hours. Draft the notice, I told Henderson. She's going to steal a file today. She'll present it to her boss by Wednesday. She'll be fired by Friday. I want this debt notice waiting for her the second she walks out of that building. I drove to my office feeling a cold, calm satisfaction. The pieces were moving. Andrea had taken the bait. Now, all I had to do was wait for her to walk into the lion's den. 1 week later, I stood in the lobby of the Vertex Tower. This wasn't the service entrance I was used to. I wasn't carrying a toolbox, and I wasn't wearing a name tag. I was wearing a black, tailored suit that cost more than the first car I ever bought. I carried nothing but a slim leather portfolio. Upstairs, in the strategic strategy room on the 45th floor, the trap was already sprung. I knew exactly what was happening because James's assistant, a woman who appreciated a good AC repair job more than a rude lawyer, had texted me the minute the meeting started. She's pitching it now, the text read. James looks happy. I took the executive elevator up. My reflection in the polished steel doors looked like a stranger. For years, I had been the invisible support beam, the person who stayed in the basement so the structure wouldn't collapse. Today, I was the wrecking ball. When the elevator chimed, the receptionist nodded at me. Miss Anderson? They're expecting you. Go right in. I walked down the long, glass-walled corridor. I could see them through the partition before they saw me. James sat at the head of the massive oak table, looking relieved. Around him sat 4 other board members, their faces illuminated by the glow of the projection screen. And there was Andrea. She was standing at the front of the room, pointer in hand, wearing a cream-colored designer suit that I knew for a fact I had paid for with last month's rent transfer. She looked radiant. She looked triumphant. She was pointing to a schematic on the screen, my schematic. It came to me late last night, I heard her say through the glass, her voice smooth and confident. I realized we were over-engineering the cooling redundancy. By streamlining the voltage load distribution here, we can cut operational costs by 20% immediately. It's a bold move, but the math holds up. James leaned back, smiling. This is impressive work, Andrea. I admit, I didn't think you had the technical background for this. I did a lot of independent research. She lied without blinking. I wanted to prove I'm ready for the lead counsel seat. Well, James said, you might have just saved this quarter. That was my cue. I didn't knock. I pushed the heavy glass doors open and stepped into the room. The click of my heels on the hardwood floor sounded like gunshots in the sudden silence. Andrea turned, a flash of annoyance crossing her face. She expected a secretary with coffee. When she saw me, the annoyance froze into a mask of pure confusion. She blinked, her eyes darting to my suit, then to my empty hands. For a second, I saw her panic. She thought I had come to fix a vent or make a scene about family drama. Rachel? She hissed, her voice dropping to a whisper so the board wouldn't hear. What are you doing here? Security is downstairs. James looked up, surprised. You know our auditor? Andrea froze. Auditor? Gentleman, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. I didn't look at my sister. I walked straight to the empty chair, at the opposite end of the table from James. I apologize for the delay. Traffic on the bridge. No problem, James said, standing up to shake my hand. Andrea, this is the independent technical auditor I brought in to verify the safety specs before we sign off. Miss Anderson runs the top MEP firm in the city. He turned to me. I didn't realize you two knew each other. We're acquainted, I said with a cool, professional smile. Andrea froze, boxed in by her own NDA, and the fact that James had just hired me. I opened my portfolio. Please continue, Andrea. I'm curious how you got these numbers. James leaned in. You did the voltage load distribution on page 14? Yes, Andrea said quickly. 3 nights of work. I stayed quiet, connected my laptop, and replaced her PDF with my live model same schematic, now covered in red warnings and simulation overlays. If you actually ran the numbers, I said calmly, you'd know why I labeled this draft catastrophic failure. I ran the simulation. The grid flared red. Page 14 is off by 15%, I told James. It only works on paper because it bypasses secondary safety breakers. Built in real life, the main transformers overheat within 48 hours, leading to a major fire risk and massive liability. James stared at Andrea, horrified. Is that true? Cornered, Andrea attacked. I didn't write that part, she did. I hired Rachel to handle the math and she sabotaged me. I smiled. If you hired me, there'd be a contract, an email, a text. I pulled up the file history. This document was created on my encrypted cloud on Monday. And at 2:14 Tuesday morning, it was downloaded from an IP registered to your apartment complex using a password you stole from my notebook years ago. I faced the room. She didn't hire me. She stole a discarded draft, stripped my name, and didn't even verify the math, because she can't. I stepped closer, voice low and steady. In engineering, ignorance isn't a slip. It's a duty of care violation. You nearly turned a skyscraper into a furnace to chase a bonus. James didn't argue. He looked to security. Escort her out. And call the bar association. Report ethics violations, IP theft, and fraudulent misrepresentation. Andrea begged. James shook her off. You're fired. Leave in 5 minutes or I press criminal charges. As the guards moved, I stopped them once. I handed Andrea a single page. You're terminated for cause, triggering the Anderson Family Advancement Trust clawback clause. The $34,000 I paid for your education is now a high-interest demand loan, due in 72 hours. Your accounts are being frozen, she whispered, shaking. I don't have that kind of money. I know, I said. Sell the car. Sell the designer pieces. I turned back to James. Apologies for the disruption. I have the correct safety protocols in my car. I can bring them up. Please, he said. In the hallway, Andrea came running, grabbing my arm, sobbing, pleading, calling me sister, promising anything. I gently removed her hand. I did take care of you for 7 years, I said. I paid for your chances to be decent. You chose to be a parasite. The elevator opened. I stepped in. The sister you knew died the night you threw money on the floor. You're not family now. You're a debtor. As the doors closed on her scream, I called my attorney. She's been terminated, I said. Execute wage garnishment and file the lien. Maximum allowed. 3 months later, the Bar Association suspended her pending investigation. Last I heard, she was working retail, every paycheck docked until the debt is repaid. My company won the legitimate bid for the tower renovation. We're expanding to 3 new states next quarter. And my life is finally quietly mine. Have you ever had to let a family member hit rock bottom to save yourself? Tell your story in the comments. And if you like watching a smart woman dismantle a narcissist without raising her voice, hit like and subscribe for the next one.